Good day and welcome to lesson number 5, writing a reaction paper. For this lesson, we will have the following objectives. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to determine the mechanics of writing a reaction paper and observe those mechanics in writing your reaction papers as well. And before we begin with the actual mechanics, we will also have the customary definition of key terms in this particular lesson. So let's proceed with the basics. What is a reaction paper? So a reaction paper is also called a review or a critique, and these are special forms of writing in which an author reviews or evaluates any of the following. 1. A scholarly work, which may include academic books, articles, science journals, and whatnot. B. A work of art, which may include performance art, plays, dances, sports, films, exhibits, or literary texts. Third, a design, be it a building, furniture, fashion design, etc. And last but definitely not the least, we also have graphic designs, which may include posters, billboards, commercials, and digital media. So how are these reaction papers written? Now, on average, a reaction paper or a review may range from 250 to 750 words. And these do not simply summarize a concept, but you are going to criticize and analyze different works or concepts found in a text. Now, writing a reaction paper requires critical thinking and the ability to take note of the arguments made by the original author. But it has to be understood that writing reaction papers do not simply involve the opinions of the author, in this case yourselves. Because this is an academic paper, your opinions and your criticisms must be supported by facts and proof. This is because we have to ensure that your criticism is in itself objective, logical, and well substantiated. Now, before we proceed with the mechanics of writing a reaction paper, you have to keep in mind that for this particular subject, there are two main reaction papers that you will be encountering. One, the reaction paper for a scholarly text, and number two, the reaction paper for a literary text. And we are going to discuss those one by one, but we will begin with the format for a reaction paper for scholarly texts. Now, there are 4 major components, and this is divided into paragraphs. The first paragraph contains the introduction, which discusses the title of the book or the article, the name of the writer, and the thesis statement of that particular work. You may also include the date of publishing. In paragraph number 2, it discusses the summary, which is composed of the objective or purpose of the paper, the methods employed by the author, and the major findings that the author included in that text. Paragraph number 3, you have review or critique, which is composed of the appropriateness of the methodology to support the arguments, the coherence of the ideas presented in the text, and the sufficiency or soundness of the explanations. In a nutshell, you can say that these are the strengths and weaknesses of the actual text. In what parts would the text be strong, and in what parts is the text weak, or what areas of improvement have you observed in the text? And last but definitely not the least, you have your conclusion, which is the 4th paragraph. And this is composed of your overall impression of the work. Okay, again, this is in general. The scholarly value of the text, what academic importance does it have, the benefits to the intended audience, and your suggestions for the future direction of the research or of the actual paper that you are reading or the material. Okay, now let's leave the reaction papers for scholarly texts aside, and let's discuss the other side of the coin, the reaction papers for literary texts. And before we discuss the mechanics of writing the reaction paper or the critique for literary texts, we have to discuss first the approaches that you're going to use. There are 4 major approaches discussed here, and I'm not saying that these are the only approaches that you can use, but For the sake of uniformity, these are the four common approaches that students use whenever they write a literary critique. Okay, these are the following: formalism, feminism, Marxism, and reader's response. Let's discuss the first one. For formalism, this is a type of criticism which contains intrinsic properties, or it focuses on the intrinsic properties of the text. This is because formalism posits that the key to understanding a text is through the text itself. And this is the definition given by Barot and Cipasio. What does that definition entail? It entails that if you want to criticize a literary text based or using the formalistic approach, you are going to use the elements of that text. Now, it will depend on whether it is poetry, drama, or a short story. But the point is, you're going to use the elements of the text. If you are evaluating or critiquing a poem, then you're going to have to use the elements of poetry in order to criticize the text itself. That is what Barot and Cipasio were arriving to. Okay, so if you want a sample of a formalistic criticism, I have included a link down below, and you can access the link using, you can access the sample using the link that I have provided. Now, moving on. The second approach is the feministic approach. Now, before we dive further into the nitty-gritty of feminism, allow me to debunk the common misconception that feminism is the study of women. That is wrong. In fact, Britannica explains that feminism is the belief in social, economic, and political equality of the sexes, which means male and female. And it advocates for the equality of those sexes. Now, feminism defines a political perspective, and it is distinct from sex or gender. It does not focus on just one gender, but it looks at both genders from a political perspective. How are the women and men portrayed in the story or in the poem? And how are those roles in terms of, or how are those roles significant in terms of their interactions in the story or the poem? Okay. Again, we don't look at who the superior gender is going to be. We are looking at gender roles. How are the women portrayed and how are the men portrayed in the story from a political perspective. That is according to Stanford in 2019. If you want a sample, link is also provided for you to read through a sample material. Now, for reader's response. Now, this is concerned with your reaction as an audience to a literary work. Okay, and this approach claims that your role as a reader cannot be separated from the understanding of the work, because you are going to be the one to allow the text to take shape based on your interpretation. In a matter of looking at it, you can say that the text is being given substance and volume through your interpretation, because somehow it humanizes the whole, the entire text. Okay. What do we do in reader's response? Well, one thing would be we will look at the connection between the reader and the character. Is there a certain character that you resonate with? Are there scenes in the story or in the poetry which you can relate to? Are there scenes in the short story which are actually happening in real life? Those are types of reader's response critiques that you can employ when using this particular approach. Now, when you want a sample, again, a link is given down below. Last but not the least, we have Marxism. Now, this approach is taken or coined from the name of Karl Marx, and it is concerned with the differences between the economic classes, the rich and the poor. In other terms, some people might call it as the struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Okay, and it deals with the continuing conflicts between the working class and the elite. We don't look at them as separate entities, but we also look at them as entities which coexist in society. So we want to know what are the struggles of the rich, what are the struggles of the poor, and what are the struggles of each other in terms of, or because they coexist. Okay, so how are the poor suffering because of what the rich are doing, and how are the rich affected by what the poor people are doing? Okay, so Marxist criticism focuses on the social classes, and we are going to look at the social class of the writer as well, and the social classes of the characters found in the story or the poem. And for a sample, you have the link down below. So the format, how do we write a literary critique? We also have 4 paragraphs, and the first paragraph deals with the introduction. We have the basic information about the text, such as the title, the director, the author, and lastly is your main assessment of the material. Would you say it is good, it is relatable, etc., etc., etc.? Second paragraph would be the plot summary or description, and this is composed of the gist of the plot, a simple description of the artwork if you are critiquing a painting probably or a play. Okay. Third, you can also have your analysis, or in stricter terms this is your interpretation for the third paragraph, and your interpretation or analysis is based on the approach that you used or selected early on, be it formalism, feminism, Marxism, or reader's response. And last but not the least, you have your conclusion or evaluation. This is composed of the reinforcement of your main assessment, the evaluation or comparison of that text to similar works, and your recommendation for the material if applicable. Okay, now, since I love formulating outlines and organizing thoughts before writing the actual text, this is just a suggested format for the outline that you might have for the reaction paper for scholarly texts. Okay, you may pause this video if you want to read through the outline. This one is the format for a reaction paper for a literary text. And again, if you want to read through the outline, you may pause this video as well. Okay. Now that being said, I think that we have fulfilled the objectives for today. We have determined the mechanics of writing a reaction paper. We have observed the mechanics of writing a reaction paper, and we have also discussed the definitions of the key terms which are found in this lesson. And with that concludes our lesson for today. Again, this is Sir Dardar wishing everyone a great day ahead. Class dismissed.